reaching net zero in fashion, is it actually possible? Can we actually define that? Is it a target that can be reached, or is it just a perpetual period of reduction?
Not at the moment. I try to elaborate more. Not at the moment, meaning that it is a so broad industry that it covers from the agriculture, from the cotton field, up to the consumer behavior and the disposal, the end of life of your garments, that so far we still don't have the technology that is helping us in all the different aspects that we have to cover. There is helps. Companies are focusing on every different aspects. You will need an holistic approach in order to reach the net zero. But as of today, I would say no. We can cope, we can reduce a lot, we can probably achieve important milestones on the journey, but we cannot talk about net zero, at least not in the next 5 years, 10 years maybe. Later on, technology is doing giant leaps every year, so I'm pretty confident for the future, but not, if everything stops now, I would say no.
I actually don't think we'll ever get to net zero, but I think we can do a lot to reduce our impact as much as possible. And we have to have all the solutions. So that's carbon capture, it's recycling, it's bio-based, it's natural, it's regenerative. But while we are still consuming and consuming at the levels that we expect, we will never achieve it. I mean, I think it's something like we have to achieve a 50% reduction in the amount of units that we buy in order to even think about hitting net zero. And let's be honest, that would pretty much tank the global economy. So until we kind of decouple finance from net zero, I just don't think it's possible.
Well, let's move on to the challenges. For you, what are some of the biggest particular challenges that the fashion industry faces in reducing its emissions and adopting more sustainable practices? What are the big challenges? Is it just as simple as price, or is there a lot more things at play?
I think it's predominantly price. It's price and profit.
Yeah, it's predominantly price, profit. It's predominantly the fact that we all work for private companies, and we cannot hide behind the fact that the business of businesses is doing business, period. It's how you make it that can make the difference. And there is a strive, there is really a fight between the price tag that you are trying to achieve, the demand that you are getting from your consumer, and the technology and the possibility that you may have in order to have a less carbon intensive garment that you can sell to the market. As of today, I wouldn't say that there is I cannot see a huge change in the consumer demand yet. There is a lot of advocacy, there is a lot of request for more sustainable clothing, but in real fact, the demand coming from the markets is still for nice looking, cheap clothing, and that changes every year. So that's one of the big deal that we have to cope with. Of course, there's a lot of things that we can do also in trying to promote as much as we can more sustainable clothing. We have been taught in the past, I think in the old industry, that providing more sustainable clothes would have been an advantage from a competitive point of view. I'm not so convinced that it is still an advantage from a competitive point of view. It's something that we all as an industry, we have to do, but we have to spend a lot of our efforts in order to educate our consumers so that they understand something which is not visible. I mean, if I provide you this jacket in cotton or in wool or in polyester, you can feel the difference. You can feel that there is a difference in quality, a difference in price. But if I can provide you this same jacket in cotton or in organic cotton, you will have the same user experience. So what is the real benefit? What is the added value that a consumer should perceive? I think this also is one of the most pressing urgency right now, to make our consumer understand that there is a set of added value that cannot be seen and cannot be felt, but it is inside a more sustainable garment rather than the other one. I don't know, Samantha, if you...
Yes, yeah,
on the same page on this.
Yes, I think there is a lot of there's a lot we need to do to educate consumers in order to make good choices. But it does also come down, I think, there was a great panel yesterday and they talked about that realistically we shouldn't be looking at SKU level. And I think this is where sometimes the fashion industry gets a little bit obsessed. Whereas actually if we look at it way more holistically, you know, it's looking at our buy patterns. So, and this I think could be quite revolutionary for the industry. If we did, these are our emissions for an entire season, then you start delving deeper into that. And part of the problem with educating consumers and putting the responsibility on them is ultimately that it takes away from the responsibility of the business, given that we've got a huge overstock problem of inventory everybody has. And whereas if we look at an entire seasonal buy and that emissions, that's going to tell us an awful lot more, I think, about consumer behaviours.
Excuse me. One thing you mentioned was the increase in demand for sustainable clothing, although it might not be a huge increase. I want to dig into that a little bit more. What kind of increase have you seen over the last few years? Could it be bigger? You know, does it surprise you how small it is? Give me some insight on that.
Let me play the old grumpy Gen X guy, which I am actually. But if you look at the last few years, the most successful business in fashion as of today is a Shein, which is something which is completely out of sustainability. It's just fast fashion on steroids. And this gives us the pulse of where the market demand really is, because it's volume that then will drive the change. I think that there is still a huge need to make our consumer understand what a more sustainable garment really is and why it is more beneficial. And that's a huge point. Going back also to what Samantha was saying, I know you probably don't agree as much. But I'm not trying to push away the responsibility of the business. But as the fashion industry is built, most of the impacts are outside our own responsibility. Meaning that if you look at the carbon emissions, the company I work for, Guess, we set the science-based targets for 2030 for the near term, 1.5 degrees. We already reached the goal 7 years in advance. But we reached the goals where we had the responsibility and we had the direct influence to change it. Where we are striving, and the whole industry is striving, is when it goes to Scope 3 emissions, when it goes to whatever is outside our direct sphere of influence, which is the biggest chunk of emissions, which is the biggest point that we have to tackle. There is a urgent need to consumer education. There is a need to cooperate all over the industry to build up coalitions that we are bringing the same message, the same request to all the different suppliers. Otherwise, as alone as a brand, we can only change how we light up our stores, but we are not going to dramatically change how we build the garments. I think that that's one point that also it's going back to your first question. Is fashion one of the most difficult industry to achieve net zero? I would say also yes, because most of the emissions are not our direct emission. They are outside our influence.
I'm so glad you brought up Scope 3 emissions. It's my favourite topic. Because yes, I think firstly, to go to your point about standardisation, we've got no standardisation in the industry on anything, even next-gen materials. We love the millions of different options, and actually we just need a few good options and we need the investment there. Because, you know, it's like when you sell going bankrupt and Infinite Fibres making redundancies, that shouldn't have happened because none of the other alternatives are scalable. So it pulls that funding in order to reduce our Scope 3 emissions. But the reason Scope 3 emissions are so high and they're so difficult to challenge is there isn't enough money. There's not enough funding coming through. It's not done in the right way. And until I think brands get together and understand that they are the ones that are going to have to help finance this through both grants, debt, but done so in local currencies. It needs to be removed from the compound interest rates and all of this. We're not going to change Scope 3, and I think that is the biggest barrier to business case in decarbonising supply chains.
Do you want to bring in also some, I also think that standardization, as you were saying, it's one key for sure. And I also believe that the standardization of the rules and regulation and requirements that we are urging all the different governments to put in place, it's another thing that will be a huge push toward it. Here in Europe, we are seeing all the different new rules and regulations that are coming with the Green Deal and everything which is related to that. US is acting alongside, but the supply chain is in Asia. So we need to push, and there are some initiatives that the fashion industry is putting in place. We are part of the UNFCCC, which is side of the United Nations, and one of the giant push that this association is doing is trying to use the business to push the different governments to change or clean their electricity grid, to decarbonize the supplier, to introduce tariffs for more polluting industries. But this is something which is really tough, and it requires a long way to go. Definitely.
Yeah, that's definitely the biggest challenge. You know, I think it was Lenzing alone said that if we can switch just one of our plants from coal to natural gas, we'll save the total emissions of the 5 biggest brands in the world.
Says it all, really, doesn't it? Well, I read more sustainability strategies than is probably healthy, but they're all with best intentions. There's all looking into Scope 3, reviewing their suppliers and so forth. Are we thinking some kind of more collaborative approach across brands would help? So let's play best idea here. How would that collaboration look in a best world? How could that work? What would be the best way to really push that needle and see the changes that we need to make?
I mean, I think we just need, as an industry, to pick an area and reduce it. You know, like audits. How many thousands of audit companies do you have for factories? If we just had 3 and they worked across maybe like Fair Wear's worker policies, and they focus on one category, then you can kind of choose as a brand and you've got 3 options, and that is a really good standardization. But it also means that that's less work for the supplier, because every brand turns up to a supplier with a supplier code of conduct and a book that thick. And you think that team's reading them. They're not. And then there'll eventually be a violation, and then they'll eventually be fined. So the more standardization that we have, it's easier for suppliers, and we create more impact.
There is also one point which is inside the industry that is against standardization, which is creativity. It's the fashion industry itself. I want to differentiate my product. I want to differentiate myself from other similar brands. And the more I can differentiate in every different bits and aspect, it will be an advantage, because I can get something which is new to the market, something which is more appealing. And this is the same mindset is also reflected when we go sourcing to all the different countries, all the different suppliers. So every brand tends to have its own approach to the supply chain, standardizing the approach and trying to have the same, at least on, we call them pre-competitive, which are really not pre-competitive, but in all the approaches, which are the requests that we are making to the suppliers. I perfectly agree with you that I go to a supplier and I say, okay, you're not going to use I don't know, coal to fire up your boiler. Then another brand comes and, I want you to install the solar panel. Then another one comes, I want you to use only regenerative cotton from regenerative agriculture. How come also the supplier they have to choose, or they have to do everything, but not in a very good way or in a very superficial way, because the investment isn't there. When you were saying, and I particularly like the point that you were saying that there is a lack of money in the supply chain, there is a lack of money to invest on achieving the net zero, which is completely true. There are some good examples. Unfortunately, they are not at big scale yet, but there are some good examples that we as a brand can do in the supply chain, meaning that if I have a good supplier, the supplier is providing me, a couple of millions of pieces every year, so I have quite a huge credit out of this supplier. I, as a brand, can act as the guarantee towards the bank in order to the supplier to achieve lower interest on their credit. So this can help funding some new projects that they are putting in place. This is something that I think it's working. It is not well spread yet because there is an intricate relationship that we have, that brands has with the supply chain. We are all partners, but we are also buyers. We are pretending we are giving them deadlines, quality requirements, social compliance requirements as well. So we act as a business partner, but we also act sometimes as the judging of the supply chain. So it's an intricate and complicated relationship, but I think that it can be exploited, it can be pushed furthermore in order to support a real decarbonization in the supply chain. And that's where the big chunk of our emission lays down. Well, I don't know your brand itself, but if I look at the numbers of the brand I work for, it's something which is very common in the fashion industry, that 75% of the emissions lays in the materials and in the manufacturing, and only 5-6% lays in the logistic, and then there are all the other different aspects of the emissions that are taken. But the big chunk is the materials we use, the manufacturers we select, how we manufacture, how we dye, how we weave all of our garments. That's the big chunk.
Well, you've touched on some examples there about how you go about doing that. I'd like to dig into some more examples. I've got plenty of years of experience on the stage here within the fashion industry. What examples have you seen of good sustainability strategies or innovations that different brands have maybe put into place that have worked? Or do you have any examples that you've seen where people have tried to do something a little bit differently, and it hasn't worked? What kind of things would you want to bring to the table there? Samantha, I'll start with you.
There's nothing that's ever perfect, but the one that kind of does really well, or certainly sort of moves the needle a little bit more than others, and I think this might be a controversial statement, but it's H&M. They have their green fund that is, I am told, got the best repayment interest rates globally, and it's quite easy to access. And they've also done quite well on water and chemicals. Obviously, we'll ignore the whole Higg index thing. So I think they do quite well. And then I think, unfortunately, the industry in terms of what hasn't worked well is we're littered with them. I don't know whether you feel the same, but I feel that Renewcell should have really just flown, and it hasn't.
I think that there is no one recipe for everyone. I mean, one size doesn't fit all. And the point is that there are a lot of different tries in the industry, and the same approach cannot work for all of the different players. You were naming the repair services, which I do believe it's one key element that we can provide also to educate the consumer. Going back to one of the first topics that we were discussing, it doesn't fit all the different brands. If I am a luxury brand, very high cost brand, don't want to name, you all know the names, and you provide the repair services, it's something which is truly appreciated to the consumer. If I am a low-price brand, probably the repair services, they are not so meaningful and I have to think of something else. There are some good examples. For example, Patagonia. They are a very great example in the repairing services. It doesn't matter if you buy their jacket 10 years ago, you bring your jacket to their store, they keep it, they repair it, they repurpose it, and you have an almost brand new jacket out of the old one that you bought. It's something which is great, but it's something which it works for them because you love the jacket, you love the adventure you had with the jacket. I mean, there is a different bond with that kind of clothing. It's kind of different if we think about, I don't know, a t-shirt. It's something which has not a huge value in it by itself, so the repair servicing is not going to work for it. It truly depends on the market you are, the price level you have, the different piece that you are providing to your consumers. So there are different initiatives. I would name repairing, the take-back program in some cases, it works. The change of materials, so switching to preferred materials and trying to use materials which has a lower impact on the planet, and I'm referring mainly to regenerative agriculture for cotton, closed-loop production for the viscose, recycled polyester, and then I'm opening a big discussion over there if we want on recycling, recycled polyester. But we can. There are different aspects in which every brand can work, and as going back to the point before, there can be some standardization which is needed, but the mix, it's going to be different for every brand because every brand has its own unique image and DNA that we have to respect. If Guess, we are known as the sex adventurous brand. If we start doing what H&M is doing with the Conscious collection, we are not going to sell anything because we will not be recognized on the market.
Where I'd like to go next is, well, it's something we keep on mentioning, and that is consumers, because they are, I guess, the key to this whole question. It's very easy to say we need to educate them. I think the key bit is how do we do it when you've got someone who has the choice of saying, right, well, I'm going to buy 5 or 6 different dresses tonight and pick the one I like and might keep a couple, might send one back. It doesn't matter, it was quite cheap. It doesn't matter, it'll live in the back of my wardrobe and it'll go to the charity shop in 6 months' time. How do you sort of battle that sort of scenario when we know where we want to take the consumers to use more sustainable materials and quality products and so forth, when that's the marketplace? How do we go about that education? And if we can answer this, we've solved a great many things. No pressure.
Well, I mean, I think you touched really well then on returns, because I think it's really difficult. You can't educate a consumer, I don't think, on all the fabrics and the makeup and everything else, particularly with the new ones that are coming to market. It's impossible. You know, you can't.
Well, they're picking it, whether they look good in the mirror or not.
Yes. So I think the big thing, and I think the one thing that actually the whole industry can move the needle on is returns, because we know it's the worst it's ever been, and that's through sizing, getting sizing right, better feedback, better customer service, changing the logistics of how we return things, maybe perhaps even punishing, dare I say, a consumer for sending it back in an unsaleable condition. Because that's, we have a huge problem with that, and that's why most of these unsold items are going to incineration.
You're not suggesting people remove the tags, try things on, then send it back, are you?
Or wear them for a couple of days.
Exactly.
Trust me, people are gross.
We can write books out.
That was the most long-suffering face I think.
Yeah, it is. No, I mean, there is not an answer, or at least I don't have an answer for your question. There are several touch points that brands has with customers. their website, the e-commerce website, the employees in our stores, that they need to be more educated in order to make the consumer perceive or understand what's inside the garment, not only the look. And this is something like changing a bit of the paradigm of the fashion, meaning that it doesn't only have to make you look good, feel good, but it also has to make you feel more conscious of what you are doing towards the planet with your choice of garments. And this is kind of difficult. On the other side, I do think that a rule set, a basic rule set, it's needed in order for everyone or for every player to play on the same field. Because that's also a huge difference in where you want to play and how you can play without the fear of being ruled out by someone who is not following the same rules that you're doing. Education is a very tricky part. It's moving. Something is moving. Something is changing. If you look at the commercial on television, also the generalist commercial, when I think, at least in Italy where I live, the latest commercial from H&M, because we named them, but also from Amazon or other marketplaces, they're not showing you or showcasing the product. They are just showcasing how they care about the environment, which are their latest cutting-edge initiative to cut their emissions. So the communication is changing a bit. I think it's something which we just started. We thought in the past, and all the different surveys were showing that consumers were keen to spend $5 more for a more sustainable piece of clothing. It doesn't work. I mean, consumers are looking to buy a more sustainable pair of jeans if it is the same price. Otherwise, they will opt for the cheaper option if it looks the same. So again, going back, we have to make them understand that they are not the same, even though they're looking the same. And this is a huge discussion also that is going on with, I think, with the merchandising team, with everyone in the company that needs to be educated first so that they can push the message up to the consumer. So it's how we can make the consumer reach the message that the real question as of today. And education will come over and over.
So I do have a question on the back of that. Do you think that a brand should be offering, like, say, for example, for denim, you've got standard cotton, organic cotton, and regenerative cotton. Shouldn't a brand just stick to one sort of cotton and perhaps use that as a branding point in order for that differentiation within the marketplace?
It's one of the strategy, I think. I'm not a marketing person, so I cannot completely answer your question, but I think that it's one of the strategies that a brand can identify itself with some key characteristic that they are sticking and they are good with their consumers. Of course, on the other side, global brands, they tend to reach all the different consumers in all the different geographies. So the broader the offer, the more winning, the more wins they will get on the market, for sure. I'm not so sure that a brand should stick with just one initiative. I would say that multiple initiatives can be blended in the offer of a brand. The difficulty is to make the consumer understand the differences, why this is better, why recycled polyester is better than first life polyester, why regenerative cotton is better than normal cotton, with a huge stress that you're making that in your store you have a pair of denim and then a pair of denim which is made of organic cotton. You have to pay a lot of attention in saying, this is made of organic, it's very good, because at the same time you're saying that the other one, it's bad, and you're selling it. So there is also this kind of message that you have to balance very much, and I think that this is also preventing a bit the education of the consumer that we can make, because you cannot say, this side of my store, it's all organic, very environmentally conscious. That means that the other side, it's not.
Yeah, we'll leave that problem to the marketing guys, shall we? Right, let's move to some questions from the room. So if anyone wishes to put some hands up, one there, okay.
Hi, this question is mainly for Nicola, but Sam, you can answer if you want. However, Nicola, I've never associated, I'll be honest, never associated Guess with a very sustainable company. I've known Guess since I was for a couple of years now. So I'm interested to know that as the director of sustainability, I feel that your position is like an FDA for Guess itself. You know, you approve what should really be, or you approve certain directives. What are if you were to pick one initiative that you would like Guess to work on from different areas of your process? So you have your range building, etc., or marketing, and you have your sourcing, you have your supply chain. What would be that one initiative that you would ideally like to implement, you think will get you to be a more, or you are sustainable brand, but you know, make a better impact towards the world?
The answer is pretty easy here, because we have to focus on where the big chunk of emissions are, so in the supply chain. And on that, I would pose two different stress, which is one of the choice of materials, so the switch from regular materials to preferred fibers and materials, and that's number one. On the second side is the choice and the partnership with the suppliers. So building new requirements for the supply chain, so that the sourcing also has to select the suppliers not only on drivers like quality, delivery, price, but including also some other pillars which are not negotiable. As a brand, we are not, I know that we are not communicating everything because it's not in the image, but just to give you a couple of numbers. Last year, 1/3 of the materials that we use for our apparel was preferred choice, so meaning that we were going for organic, recycle, and so on. And that's the beginning, because in my view, it has to expand more and more. The big deal will be in the supply chain with the suppliers in order to understand each different suppliers, which could be the sweet spot for each one of them to increase or whether to decrease their emissions. And the point is that being a total look, I mean, we are clothing up people from the shoes to the hat and everything they bring in their hand. The supply chain is so diverse that we need to have tailor-made approaches with each different supplier, which poses a lot of challenges, because you cannot say that one approach works for all of your supply chain. It's something that you need to tailor-made with all of the suppliers. So the vetting of the suppliers, it's one big challenge that we have to face.
If it's very quick, yes.
And what is the concentration for Guess on taking responsibility of end of life of your products? Because you've just said that you've got a really wide variety of products. What is your opinion on the upcoming legislations of the extended producer responsibility, and then how do you connect that with the end of life?
Okay, this is something that brands they were already doing. Some brands, well, more than a few, they were already running take-back programs in their shops. They were taking back used garments. The point is that the brand itself cannot do very much of the used garments that they are taking back. They are relying on external partners to treat the used garments in the best way. So recondition them, sell them on secondary market, used market, or send them for recycling in the specialized industry. Honestly, I welcome the the extended producer responsibility rule, it's something that is pushing everyone to think more of what he has to do with the end of life of the product. The big point on the garment industry is how we make our garment. That when you make a t-shirt which is 100% cotton, it's pretty easy to recycle it. If you're making a t-shirt which is a blend of 2-3 different type of fibers, then it's going to be very difficult to recycle it. So it's how we produce and the garments that we produce. Having an extended responsibility means that it impacts also the design of our garments, so that we are forced, we as not as a brand but as an industry, we will be forced to think about the recyclability of our garments from the design phase, which should be the correct address here.
And the goal towards net zero.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. If we can keep these to the point, I'd be very grateful.
Thank you. Sorry, I raised my hand too. Yeah, I just had a question on the collaborative action side to both of you. Sorry, my name is Marlies. I work on climate investments at South Pole. In the example, for example, cotton farming, and you choose a particular landscape, for example, cotton farming in a particular region in Tanzania, you will see multiple companies sourcing from the same farmers sometimes, and it's not a single company's responsibility to decarbonize or transition those farmers to sustainable practices. And we see often companies hesitant to invest in those cases where if one company invests, all the others will also benefit, and it kind of has this pre-competitive disadvantage in a way. So beyond standardization, but really looking at how to finance that transition, especially at the farming scale, what would be needed to enable such collaborative action at the landscape level, looking at transitioning to sustainable farming practices?
So I think we actually already have that in the form of, for example, the Better Cotton Initiative, because they go in and they do those farms, and then brands come in, they have that marketing behind them, so you've got that great label, and they do a lot of consumer-facing work on that. And then you pay a higher price for that because, again, a brand loves a free swing ticket, and that will benefit. And I think that's a really good example of whereas we need, I think, more of that. But I think a large problem comes down to data, actually, with that, because we expect a lot of farmers to provide the data in order to make the impact, but they're not being paid for the data. And then we've got the question of who owns the data, because data is money at the end of the day.
I think it goes back to what we were saying before about the standardization, meaning that it's difficult that as a brand we don't have access to the field where the crop is made. And as we were saying, we always thought that this would be pre-competitive, some pre-competitive initiative, but they are not, because if I invest on some supplies, someone is coming and basically it's a free surfer out of my money. So it's something that everyone is not really keen on. The ideal would be probably to have some standardization, meaning like the Better Cotton or the Textile Change. There are several initiatives out there that are trying to standardize what the offer coming from the multitude of suppliers is doing, so that the brands, they can do and select and pick something which should have improved performances from a carbon point of view, from a sustainability point of view. As a brand alone, it's very, very difficult to go into the supply chain a little bit deeper on.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to get to any more questions to the room. I do apologise. I do want to get to one question from the digital audience. We are running a little behind time on this. I'll pick the most upvoted question. And Nicola, this is one for you, particularly about guest policy. And that's how do you go about monitoring supplier emissions? Are you just looking at tier one suppliers? And how do you look further down that value chain to other tiers?
Okay. How much time do we have? No, the point here is that as a brand, but basically the whole industry and not talking about the luxury brands that they have a kind of different business model, but the generalist brands, the business relationship is with your tier one supplier, meaning that you have influence and you can onboard all of your tier one suppliers, or you try to push on the ones that you have business relation with. If you go beyond, it's a very difficult exercise of traceability, tracking, as well as some of the suppliers, most of the suppliers, they're not really keen to disclose completely their supply chain because their fear is that you're going to jump them and go to the next step by yourself, cutting them out. The point here is yet back again to education. So onboarding them, educating them, making them understand that it's going to be a requirement, as well as the quality of the product, as well as the on-time delivery. Sustainability, decarbonization is going to be, or it's already be, a requirement, and they have to include, as we are including our suppliers, they will have to include their suppliers as well. It's like a chain that needs to be tied up and work one ring at a time.
And I think, Nicola, you've done phenomenally well to answer that in about 2 minutes, because any supply chain and multi-tier question can be as long as a piece of string of your choosing. Thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed the discussion. A round of applause for our panel. Thank you.
Thank you.